The Earth is dying. There's no doubt in anybody's mind. Takes off the rose-colored glasses and just spends one day doing research. Scientists from Stanford University have studied the phenomenon very closely. They said several years ago, we're in the midst of an extinction. What can kill birds, fish, all sea life being affected, almost all vegetation being affected? What would do that to everything underwater and above water? What would do that? And the one thing that would do that would be radiation. We know what causes the radiation. We've tracked what's causing this extinction, and now it kind of gives us a clue as to past extinctions. One of those things that we know about is that Planet 9 is real. And Planet 9, a brown dwarf, emits electrons, helium, lithium. And therefore, when I show you the helium instruments right in front of you, how blatantly redacted and cut off all helium measurements have been. And the last of the helium measurements have gone. Bye-bye. Electron measurements are going bye-bye as well. And it has affected all animals. And we know why it has affected all animals. Water quality, loss of habitat, loss of food. And then the oceans. We have algae blooms unlike never seen before. Bait fish and krill die off. Then the food chain starts to collapse as the dominoes fall one after another. And still nobody wants to tell you the truth. Nobody wants to be honest. Even your guy that you think special in Congress, in the presidency even, they're not telling you what's going on. They're not telling you how to prepare. They're not. I don't care how wonderful you think your guy is. There's certain things that are being kept from you. And they're so important a matter of survival. And as the one percenters run the world and ruin the world, the biggest threat comes from the sky. And as we have seen over and over again, the excuses and the lies just go on unchecked most of the time. And whale beachings, it's the sunspots. Again, sunspots being blamed for all kinds of stuff. Poor sunspots. Talk about hate speech. People hate the sunspots. But there is no sea creature, not anything, not a single creature in the sea has not been affected by the algae blooms, both blue-green and red algae, by the microplastics, but deoxygenation, changes in salination and salinity, and it's worked its way up the food chain. We had a massive krill die-off in 2012. And when you ask and talk about Fukushima, nobody wants to talk about the white elephant in the room. But every bird that you see going by in front of you has suffered a major collapse in numbers and in species, and currently we're experiencing a massive migratory bird die-off in the southwest. So why are the bird die-offs affecting more than one species? And a lot of it has to do with the heat from the sky. And that releases methane. And that increases the amount of methane being dumped annually. And then that in turn spurns on even higher temperatures. So if you have a methane runaway and you have a solar and cosmic radiation going crazy, how do you keep from cooking your oceans, your tidal pools, especially your shallow bays, your inlets? Those are just cooking. And even the Sea of Cortez is experiencing abnormally high surface temperatures. And it's the surface temperatures that are a dead giveaway. It's almost pathetic and outright discouraging when you try to show people what's happening and try to arrive at real solutions, but nobody wants to listen. And they want to put you in a box and shut you up. The weather going crazy is a part of heating. You get more moisture in the sky. But all animals have been affected. Every animal that's on this planet has been affected by fires and heat and food and habitat issues. And the trees are dying globally. And when people report on the trees dying globally, most of them report on the trees dying locally. Millions and millions and millions of trees have died, and then you throw in these apocalyptic wildfires that double your kill ratio or double your kill rate. If you have 66 million trees in the Sierra Nevada alone in 2010 die, and then that number just kept going up. Now it's up to 126 million, and then you have apocalyptic wildfires. It's not going to be very long before we have no more forest. And what kills half a tree? And basically, south-facing trees are taking the biggest heat. Ones that are near the street taking the biggest hit. And people talk about the maple trees. People talk about the sugar pine. People talk about the beech nut. People talk about the apple tree. People talk about the spruce tree. But nobody is talking about all the trees. So to put it all together, there's very few people who are coming out and telling you the truth. Even plants that are designed for heat and designed for the desert are undergoing extreme stress related to the surface temperature of the ground. When your ground temperature is 180 degrees, all the saguaro cactus, all the cactus are scarring. And then there's the fires. And the one thing that is upsetting is fires you can put out, but you have to put them out as soon as you see the smoke. And there can't be a monetary incentive to let fires burn. There has to be created a monetary incentive to put fires out. People have to be rewarded for putting fires out. And the emergency funding for states is ridiculous. Governors let the fires burn so they can get millions of dollars. And then they pay prisoners 50 cents an hour to try to put out the fires. Nothing is unaffected by the solar system heating. All planets are heating. That's been proven. But the one thing that bothers me most is children. And finally, the World Health Organization, people that I don't really even like, but they started to admit what's going on. This is a message about children. Listen to what they say. Extended sun exposure during childhood increases the risk of skin cancer later in life and can cause serious damage to the eyes. That's because ultraviolet reflects off the ground. All children below 15 have sensitive skin and eyes. Protect them and set a good example for them. Why? Because they're rapidly growing. And rapidly dividing cells are more susceptible to radiation than cells that are not rapidly dividing. They don't want to use the word radiation. Get this. Children below 1 year of age must never stay in direct sun. So when you put your child in a car and that that sun comes in and hits a child, you're being absolutely reckless, irresponsible, and you're hurting your own child. They say, get this, sun is getting stronger. There it is, right there. The sun is getting stronger. Now, how does that happen during the Maunder minimum? How does that happen? I'm sorry I get so belligerent about this, but you know, lives are being lost every day because of the side effects and the symptoms of this heat. The sun is getting stronger and children are exposed to its damaging rays during lunch and recess. That's been an issue for a couple years now. So encourage your children to use sun protection and to take a break in the shade. If the teacher's not going to make them take a break in the shade, then you should. They should not be out for more than 20 minutes in direct sunlight wearing a hat and possibly even sunblock. Most of our lifetime, UV radiation exposure occurs before the age of 18. We spend a lot of time outside in the sun and at the pool. So, yeah, before you're 18, it's very, very likely that you get more sun than adults. When the adults start going to school and working college, that keeps you indoors. So most of our lifetime, UV radiation exposure happens before the age of 18. And if you protect yourself now and you protect your children now, your skin will look healthier and look younger throughout your life. But parents, protect your children from the sun. Teach them about avoiding sun exposure and the proper steps for sun protection. And sunblock is just not the answer. It's helpful, but it's not the answer. People put on sunblock, go out to the beach for 4 hours, 5 hours, get horrible sunburns. So protective clothing is a must. UV related umbrellas, hats, sunblock, but also drinking chlorophyll. But the forests are as ominous and as mind-boggling in terms of scope, in terms of numbers. The numbers of trees dying is staggering. It's unbelievable, and so are the number of fish and sea creatures dying, and so now are the number of birds. We are in the midst of an extinction. And if you don't do something about it, you're going to lose the ability to make decisions for yourself. You're going to end up in a FEMA relocation center. You're going to end up on welfare. You're going to end up going hungry. Health care is going to get worse and worse. They're going to, the sick and the elderly are going to be out in the cold as the economies collapse, as the food supply dwindles. And the excuses of the bark beetle, don't buy into it. Bark beetles don't kill a tree in a single summer. Bark beetles don't kill one side of the tree. Bark beetles don't pick on just the south-facing trees. Bark beetles don't kill a tree overnight. Bark beetles actually pick on sick trees. So sick and damaged trees will always get bark beetles. So bark beetles are more of a symptom of a sick forest than they are the cause of a sick forest. And then you'll see articles about, well, how dead trees are good for the forest. Anybody that writes an article about how good these dead trees are for the forest and how beneficial they are, you need to take note of the publication and boycott that publication. They are doing you a disservice. When a quarter of your forests have died in the past 10 years, a quarter, think about that. 1/4 of your forests have died in just the span of 10 years. You can go 20 years, okay? And and they want to tell you how good it is. That's just, it's mind-boggling that people have the audacity to write articles like that. And that kind of disinformation breeds complacency. And the excuses don't add up. And people cling to these excuses because they don't want to face the truth. Well, the fires are so bad because we don't thin the forest. Well, what changed in the last 20 years? Did our forest double in terms of adult trees? No. To become an adult tree takes tens of years, 30, 40 years for a pine tree to become an adult. So if you have all these mature trees, very thick and dense, that didn't just happen in the last 10 years. And so we've had dense forests all along. And once you start putting out wildfires, you're kind of committed to putting out wildfires. You can't say, well, we need to let our forest burn because fires are natural this and natural that. It's not natural during an extinction. Okay? Fires come and go during healthy periods for planet Earth. Earth is not in a healthy period. And to put out fires is really quite simple because why? When there's fire, there's smoke. So it's kind of like a little fire alarm. But the amount of planes spraying mineral oxides in the sky, creating shade, during fire season, they need to pull those to the ground and fill them full of water. Dirty water, I don't care. Water balloons, I don't care. High altitude drops, so you don't have to train these people to fly low altitude drops. Make it rain and get these dozens of planes in the air the minute you see smoke. Do not let the fires burn. Any governor that lets fires burn and then has to declare a state of emergency should be recalled immediately. He's a threat to your state. And none of them are going to be honest with you. It's the lies, the deceit, the deception is systemic. It is comprehensive. It is all inclusive. There is hardly anybody in politics that's going to tell you what is going on. So create shade. Shade your crops. And the government should be making shade in industry, and you think they are. They're spraying in the air. And the people who say that chemtrails are killing the forest have done a disservice because they've failed to understand why they're spraying in the air. If they're trying to kill the forest, they're doing a crappy job because these chemtrails have been coming down since 2007, 2008. And it's taken them 15, 20 years just to kill 25% of the forest. Give me a break. Alkalinity of the soil is bad for the trees. It makes them sick. It makes growing young trees hard. But it doesn't kill south-facing trees. It doesn't kill trees that are near rock outcrops because the outcrops of the rocks absorb heat and radiate heat. Doesn't kill cactus. Cactus are supposed to love the sun. So your crops are dying, your forests are dying, and nobody wants to talk about how you can shade things. Well, how do you shade a forest? Well, that's a great question. But thick forests create their own shade. Thick trees create their own shade. So when you thin your forest, you expose your ground cover to direct sunlight, and you start killing off all the insects and the life that live underneath the pine needles. You used to go just take your hand and used to scoop over a bunch of pine needles. You would find at least ants, termites, bugs, grubs. You don't find anything anymore. So the thing we need the trees to do is to create their own shade, but we're going to prevent that now to prevent fires. What needs to happen is a whole revamping of our fire prevention. Our forests need to have fire engines called airplanes sitting on tarmacs ready to go. And they got to be filled with water, and the pilots have to be on call, and they have to get paid to be on call. And there should be bonuses for putting out fires. And like I say, governors who have to declare states of emergencies should automatically be forced to resign their position. There is absolutely no excuse for not having hundreds of planes filled with water sitting on tarmacs, ready to go. When there's smoke, you get not 2 or 3 or 4. You get dozens of them planes in the air, and you get that fire out in the first 24 hours. Penalize people for not putting out fires. Reward people for putting out fires, and our forests would stop burning. Our forests would stop burning. But when we make a video telling you our forests are going to burn because we looked at Australia as a precursor, what are you going to do? You're going to sit there with your thumb up your nose and say, we're not going to do anything different. We need to get more prisoners on the fire line. That's the last thing you need. Those guys are helpless. You're spitting into the wind. And with firefighters now admitting to, what do they say? Sun-driven fires. Sun-driven. I've never heard that term till this year. And a fire captain in Arizona made that statement. These are sun-driven fires. So, the word's getting out. Even Trump, during a campaign speech, he said it's the hottest sun he's ever felt. So there's Obama in a rally said, I hope you all wearing sunscreen. And the evidence is there. I mean, it's not like you have to look very far for it. Even with the massive, incredible censorship going on in the internet and the browsers and all the disinformation that they're trying to push in your face about bark beetles, it's the obvious is obvious. Just go lay out in the sun. We got to quit thinning the forest, and we got to start putting out fires when there's smoke. These planes have to be ready to go. And that's like easy. It's not hard to do because we got all these planes flying in the air now spraying mineral oxides, and we've had some of the heaviest spraying in the Southwest that we've seen in a long, long time. It is so extensive, the spraying, that you can see it on satellites. So, hey, yeah, thanks for trying to create shade. But the bottom line is we could create shade right here on Earth that's less harmful and more effective. If every house had a shade screen over it, mounted 4 inches above the roof, every house had a ramada over its own roof, every house had awnings over the windows, every house had reflective barriers in the windows. Oh my goodness, the amount of energy you'd be using would go way down, and the safety of the people in the house would be, wholly a lot better, because I'm telling you right now, the solar radiation is going to go up. It's going up right now. It's going up higher than it's ever been, because our cosmic rays are at highest densities we've ever seen in the solar system. The sun focuses those in and then lights them up. And all the instruments that would prove that have been taken offline. These people are a threat to you. And And the ignorance is a threat to you. The disinformation is a threat to you. And if you think somehow this is fear-mongering, just read these headlines. So, how do you shade trees at your own house? You know, linen works. Linen works. Keeping your trees full. The external part of the tree shades the internal part of the tree. So your tree loses leaves from the outside in. But most of the sea life lives within the first 25 feet of water, first 30 feet of water. There's so much life inside the coral reefs. And you could shade them. Every time there's dead seaweed on the beach, they bring a bulldozer down. They scoop it up, they put it in a truck, drive it away, and bury it. What they should be doing is binding it with rope and towing it back out to sea and anchoring it over your coral. Creating what? Shade. They could be doing that, but they're not. Boats that are docked in on the dock can be towed out to a reef or towed out and moored in the ocean, and then people could be ferried back and forth to those boats. Those boats themselves create shade. So you can moor boats over the edges of your reef and use the boats and get them off the dock. Get them away from the docks. You could take plywood, and plywood floats, especially in salt water, and anchor sheets of plywood in certain areas. There's so many ways you can create shade. Another thing you can do is you could take and dredge up tons of sand, and instead of planes flying in the air spraying mineral oxides, you could have boats sailing up and down coral reefs, dumping sand into the water and creating murky water to reflect the sun, to shade the ocean. But now's not a time to be thinning your forest. You're gonna enhance the heating of the surface of the earth. You're going to kill the ferns. If you go look at the ferns when they get to be about 12 inches high, 16 inches high, those ferns now are in summer. And when they get that high, and all the ones that are not shaded are dead. They turn brown and die. What makes them grow in the first place if they're going to die? That's because they start growing before the weather gets too hot. And then as they grow, the sun comes up and gets hotter and hotter and hotter as we head out of spring and into summer. And there goes the ferns. They aren't shaded. So, and ferns are great shading for ground cover. But you get rid of your shade, then you get rid of your insects. And when you get rid of your insects, and you get rid of the birds, hurt your vegetation. Extreme ultraviolet prevents trees from reproducing. Some trees will not fruit. If you grew corn in the Southwest and didn't cover it, you could have watered it 3 times a day, and you could have grown them 6 feet tall, 7 feet tall, but this corn did not produce. They did not produce kernels on the ears. You want to tell me that's a bug doing that? So, I mean, if we don't rise up and demand adaptation, then we're going to flounder out here. And many people said that the government thinks that you being desperate for food and water would make you more controllable. And yeah, maybe it'll put you at their mercy. But sooner or later, if we don't all join together and force these changes, you're going to get exactly what you asked for. You're going to get a world of grief, and it's already happening. The earth is crying for help.